Hello and welcome guys back to Ableton Live. I'm Eric and today I want to show you some crazy basses that sound a bit like Neuro or Noisia basses. So let's see, we've got the first one here which sounds fairly like this. And we've got another one here which is basically sounding like that. Okay, so the technique is very simple. It's basically frequency modulation synthesis, and we're gonna use operator in Ableton Live for this. The first thing we're gonna hear is sound like that. It's a very deep sine wave. You probably can't hear it without headphones or good speakers. So if we modulate this sine wave with a square wave, things start to change. It sounds a bit squarey, a bit squishy. We modulate the square wave with another sine wave, which is basically turned up by 14. I don't know exactly how to pronounce this, and since I'm from Germany and this is fairly hard. By the way, if you are from Germany and don't understand anything I said to this point, I uploaded the tutorial in German too, so just click here on the screen somewhere to get to the German tutorial. Basically, we modulate the oscillator B with oscillator C and the things start to sound different like that. Sounds a bit more interesting. And at last we modulate oscillator C with oscillator D. This modulator is turned up by 24. Things start to sound like this. Yeah, you probably noticed that band reject or notch filter, which basically acts like it should, but it's modulated with an envelope, and the envelope looks like this. We have an attack time of 346 milliseconds, a decay of 4.36 seconds, turned that envelope up by 26%. So if we go through the envelope tabs of each of these oscillators, we can see that I have no envelope except that decay and sustained turned down. Use the loop function in this oscillator, which is turned to sync and then to repeat. Then we do the same thing on oscillator B, but here I used an envelope which is like at 0.74 milliseconds and a decay at 245 milliseconds. Turn the sustain all the way down and then use the sync function again and used the repeat of 1/6. I also have a pitch envelope which is turned fully down to -100%, a decay and a release settings. So basically we move on further through the chain. We have an EQ8 which makes the sound much more relevant in this frequency range. Things start to sound a bit more like the sound we had in the beginning. And I then map the macro to the frequency, which goes from 1.76 to 733 Hertz. Moving on, we have an auto filter. The auto filter is basically a band reject, or as you call it, maybe notch, I think, which has a frequency of 214 Hertz and a resonance of 67%. Moving on, we have an audio effect rack with 2 chains in it. The last chain is only like the dry signal of the sound, and the second chain, which is the upper chain, is turned down by -8 decibels, which is a auto filter 2, which has an envelope modulation with attack 0.1 milliseconds and a release of 130 milliseconds, which is basically a band pass filter. I can show you how the band pass filter sounds on its own. And how the dry signal sounds. Can hear that there's some phasing going on, but that's what I wanted in that particular sound. Another audio effect rack with 2 chains Basically the same setup. We have the lower chain, which is the dry signal, and the upper chain, which is like a modulated chain. I used Valhalla Freak Echo and turned the mix all the way up, turned the delay around like 2.9 milliseconds and moved the shift down. Yeah, if you basically play around with the settings so you find the sound that you like, then it's all right. I recommend to cut the lows a bit and to cut the highs a bit so the sound doesn't conflict too much with the dry signal. So basically the sound of the Valhalla is like that. Also a bit stereo-feely, and if we combine the two sounds, it sounds like this. Yeah, we're getting there. And as next we have another free plugin, which is Camelcrusher. I really like this plugin because it's a great way of distorting and can also be very subtle and very destroying. So we have turned on the distortion, turned the tube basically to the half and the Mac completely down if you load it up. And then I removed the fat mode from the compressor, turned the compressor a bit down and leave the master as it is. Now the sounds start to get crushed and it sounds like this. Yeah, we are fairly close to the original sound. Now moving on, we have an audio effect rack again. You see, we have a rack and a rack and a rack and a rack, and we are racking everything in Ableton. No, that's a bad joke. Sorry. Here we have the same setup as before, but different because the lower chain is like the bass chain. I've put an FabFilter Pro Q because it sounded nicer than the Ableton EQ, and afterwards some Camelcrusher to burst the clean signal a bit more and compress it a bit harder. So you can see the settings. If you want, you can just copy them or leave them as it is. And in the other chain we have the Head Crusher, which is also a free plugin. Basically, I've turned up the drive a bit, cut the lows, turned the tone a bit down, and cut it the high end. So the sounds on the Head Crusher sounds like that. Very, very distorted, but also very distinctive and aggressive. I kind of like the way that Head Crusher distorts. And we have the low end, which is crushed fairly hard, and now it comes through better. At the end of the chain we have a Camelcrusher again, and that's I think the third one of the Camelcrusher plugins. On here it's basically just gluing the high end and the low end back together to make a sound like this. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the next sound, which I think is more interesting for you guys than the other one, but that is compared to likes. So we first start out with the operator settings, but you can see it's fairly the same. So I removed the pitch envelope and the filter settings, tweaked around with these knobs a bit. I just open you this up. If you want, you can copy this settings, or I put a preset up. So you can basically just download the preset and use the sounds for yourself. So this is for oscillator C. You can pause the video and just copy the settings if you want. This is oscillator D. And basically you can tweak those settings always the way you like. So in this tutorial you can see the auto filter and the ping pong with this red dot, which means they have an automation, but they are not used in this particular sound in here. As you can see, they don't turn on. So we're moving forward to my chain again, which is basically the EQ, added with 2 band notches, which is basically band 3 at 1 kilohertz and band 4 at 4.34 kilohertz. I also just copied those settings and turned the macro all the way up. So yeah, I just remove all these or turn them off so we can hear the difference in sound that this processing afterwards makes. So we get the auto filter again, which yeah, basically the business you know. We've got the rack again, and this rack is basically really senseless since I turned off the upper chain, so you can ignore this. Some stuff happening here. Basically now the Valhalla comes in again, and slightly different settings. I turned the mix all the way up again, turned the delay down, and have the shift at minus 10.24 Hertz. You can basically pause this video and copy the settings if you want, or download the preset in the script. So basically in the description you will find an instrument rack for bass 1 and bass 2, and you find the operator preset only for bass 1 and bass 2. Yeah, that's the dry chain again. Moving on, this sound sounds now like this. Basically all the movement is coming from there. We have a Camelcrusher again, which is basically just a copy of the Camelcrusher in the bass above. And we have the audio effect rack again, which is basically just separating the upper and lower bands. In addition, I put a flanger on here, which makes the sound a bit filthy, I guess. And I also experimented with dimension expander, but it's turned off again. We have the head crusher with slightly different settings. You can basically just pause the video and copy them too if you want. Yeah, for the sake of the video I can turn on the phaser, which is making some fairly different sound now. So you can see you can basically free your creativity. I would not suggest to put dimension expander on something like this. So yeah, basically moving on to the next chain, which is basically just again the high cut and the Camelcrusher in addition. Yeah, you can basically use Ableton Equalizer EQ8 for the Pro Q. So yeah, at the end of the chain we have a Camelcrusher again. You can copy the settings if you want. Yeah, that's basically it for these two bass sounds. I will upload the files so you can check the description for a free download. But basically that's it for this tutorial. I think it's far too long. And yeah, for two bass sounds, it's far too long. If you have a suggestion or like my videos, just hit the subscribe button or comment on this video. And we will see us in the next one.